Seamus here yet again with another exciting video and informative video for all my loyal followers out there. So I want you to share this video. I want you to do everything you can to get this video out there because it's extremely important. You need to educate your family, your friends, your workmates, your schoolmates, your grandparents, your siblings, everyone. I want you to get the word out about this video to everyone you know. So in 1961, you had a crime rate of 2,000 crimes per 100,000, and by 10 years later, in 1971, we had a crime rate of 4,000 for every 100,000, and you know what? That only went up and 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 up. Let's get this message out there. Share this video. Share it with your family, with your friends, on Facebook, on Twitter, on Reddit. There were 2,000 crimes per 100,000 in 1961. And by 1971, which is 10 years later, that number increased to 4,000 out of 100,000. So I want to see this video on Reddit X posted to almost every subreddit because this is pertinent info to almost every topic known to man. By 1981, we were up to 8,000 violent crimes per 100,000 people. And you can see how there's a gradual increase here throughout the years. And after 1981, it continued to grow all the way until 1991. Violent crime since 1991 has fallen 51%. In 2013, and it's 2016 now, in 2013, the crime rate was at its lowest point since 1970. And this video is not only for my subscribers and for my followers. It's my hope and dream that this video is shared with millions worldwide. This is the video I think that is guaranteed to go viral because the issue that I'm going to be talking about in this video is an extremely pertinent issue in our society today that we are still dealing with, that people are still in denial about. And people are in denial about the link between lead poisoning during childhood and criminality. So there have been many studies linking lead exposure during childhood to criminality later in life. So basically what started this theory is people were wondering what caused the crime wave of 1962 through the early 60s to the early 90s. And I'll go over this in greater detail later in the video, but pretty much there was a huge spike in crime that continued to increase all the way through the 70s, 80s, and eventually culminated in the 90s, the early 90s, about 91, 92, and gradually after that, the crime rate began to decrease. And it decreased all the way through the 90s, and today we have the lowest crime rate since 1970. So people wonder what caused this increase in crime, first of all, starting in the early 60s, all the way through the early 90s when the crime rate suddenly dropped, and they wonder what caused it to drop. People have been putting forth all sorts of theories about this. Criminologists, sociologists, psychologists, they all have their own theories regarding the causes and effects that led to these crime wave and the eventual decline. But there's one theory out there that has only recently been given scientific backing and has only recently been taken seriously by these people, and this is the topic of the video: lead poisoning. Now, you may be wondering how could that explain a huge crime wave? Well, I'll be going over this in great detail in this video, and I will also be explaining how this issue still affects us today, even though the crime wave is pretty much over. We can expect to see another crime wave in the very near future, thanks to the excessive levels of lead that have been found in schools. I live in New Jersey. There have been several scandals in cities like Trenton and Newark and New Brunswick, New Jersey, where they have found excessive levels of lead in the drinking water, and kids are drinking this water. And we wonder why cities like Trenton and Newark have such high crime rates. Well, this is why. This is the reason is because of excessive lead exposure. So let's dive into my presentation, and hopefully by the end of this video you'll be convinced and you will want to take action against the government for knowingly poisoning the population with lead. And the reason they do this is because prisons are privately owned corporations, and the more people that get sent to jail, the more money goes in the pockets of crooked judges and crooked officers of the law, and also the corporations who own these maximum security prisons also get money in their pocket by the mass poisoning of populations. So let's dive into this, and like I said, hopefully by the end of this video your mind will be changed and you will be exposed to a world that you've never known existed, and you'll open your mind to new possibilities and new realms of the imagination, and your life will be better as a result. So you're going to want to share this video with all your friends. You're going to want to be taking notes during the video. Open up the comment box, and while I'm discussing this, just write down little tidbits that you pick up if you have any opinions about what I'm saying, or if you want to save it for later. I suggest typing it all in the comment box and copying and pasting it onto Facebook, and don't forget a link to this video in that post, because you're going to want to share this with your family and friends. People need to know about this. So you can see how there was a gradual increase throughout the 80s, or throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and then all of a sudden it went down and it decreased 51%, and now we're at our lowest rate since the 1970s. 1970, to be exact. Now, the wide-ranging causes of this 3-decade crime wave and its subsequent decline have been studied extensively. One important factor only recently to emerge as credible is the effects of lead poisoning. Alright? People have only been studying this for a little while. And I'm going to get into the history behind this theory. The first person to kind of put his finger on the pulse of this issue was a guy named Rick Nevin. And Rick Nevin, he was a consultant in the Department of Housing and Urban Development. And he did many studies and did many calculations. He's an expert in this field. So he concluded that if you add a lag time of 23 years, lead emissions from cars explain 90%. Alright, lead emissions from cars explain 90% of the variation in violent crime in America. So basically what he's saying is people get exposed to lead early in their lives when they're children, and then there's if they are exposed to lead, and they grow up to do violent crimes, and there's a 90% chance that the lead poisoning early in life contributed to them doing those violent crimes later in their lives. So that's a pretty convincing study. That's a very what else can you say about that? That's scientifically verified by somebody who's in the know. Somebody who spent his entire life working with communities across the nation, developing communities, helping communities out. He's been in the down and dirty world of these communities, and he knows what is ailing people. He knows the causes and effects that lead to the problems that these people have, because this is this guy's job. This is Rick Nevin's job. This is Rick Nevin's expertise. He knows all about violent crime and its effect on the communities, but what he has paved the way for, and what he's a pioneer in the field of, is determining what caused a violent crime. And people think it's due to socioeconomic reasons. Well, it is, except that it doesn't have to do with any sort of nurture effect. It has everything to do with the natural reaction in the brain to lead emissions, which I'll explain the exact causes a little later in my presentation today. But I just want to reiterate that lead poisoning causes accounting for lead poisoning, you can associate lead poisoning early in life with 90% of the variation in violent crime. So that's a pretty significant part, and it's a significant reason why the country experienced that horrible crime wave that extended from 1961 all the way to 1991. So you may be asking yourself, how did so many people get exposed to all this poisonous lead? And, well, besides the fact that the government knowingly poisons us, I'll explain that furthermore right now. Lead emissions rose from the early 40s to the early 70s until unleaded gasoline took over. So basically what this means is from the early 40s to all the way to the early 70s, they had lead in gasoline. They had lead in petrol. You know how you go to the gas station even today and you see unleaded gas or leaded gasoline? Well, leaded gasoline is still available today, but back in the 40s through the 70s, it was widespread. People drove their cars around, and emissions were a whole lot worse back then. They didn't care two goddams about the environment or what the impact of these emissions were on not only the environment but the communities surrounding roads, surrounding highways, and usually these are poor communities surrounding these major highways, and living in houses still painted with lead paint, which was banned in the early century. So you still have all these contributing factors to lead poisoning, and the number one reason for all this lead poisoning was the fact that you had this lead in gasoline that was poisoning people in mass numbers, and nobody even took time to consider the effects. Either that, or they knew what the effects would be, and it was all a vast conspiracy. So whether or not you believe that is up to you, but the fact is that lead emissions from petrol from the 40s into the early 70s until unleaded gasoline took over was a huge factor. It was a huge factor in the crime wave of the 60s, the early 60s, to the early 90s. Because if you look at the timeline, the early 40s, 20 years later, that was the early 60s. That's the beginning of when they started using lead gasoline. And you can look at this chart right here. I'll put the chart up right beside me here, and you can see the chart. Basically, you'll see the corresponding data charts. It shows the first line is from 1937 to 1986, and it is gas lead in tons per 1,000 people. And then the other line, and it corresponds almost exactly 20 years later, is the violent crimes per 100,000 people. So you'll see the U-shape, you'll see the gradual rise in the leaded gasoline from the late 30s to the early 70s, and you can see that steep incline. And then you can see the corresponding incline over on the other line, which is the violent crimes for 100,000 people, starting in the 60s, the early 60s, which is 20 years later from when the gas lead in tons line started. And you can see that around the mid 70s and also in the mid 90s, you'll see that there's the peak up there, and then it gradually declines. So you had both the decline in people using leaded gasoline, and then 20 years later you had the decline in people doing violent crimes. And yes, they correspond, and yes, there is a correlation there, and I believe there is a causation, as many other people do. Many other people have done studies regarding this, and it is scientific fact. So you cannot deny this. You cannot deny this chart. And even if you are completely numb to the reality of the situation, you cannot deny the chart right there. That's cold, hard facts, people. You cannot deny that, and there is an association, and this should be looked into more. So just take a closer look at this data chart. I want you to screenshot that and save it on your computer and share it with all your friends immediately, even before you share this video, because it'll pique their interest and they'll want to learn more. And then after that, you can share this video with them, and then they can get all the information you're getting now. You can sit around the water cooler at work. You can sit around the cafeteria table and discuss this video with all your friends. You can discuss ways to change the system. You can discuss ways how we need to increase awareness about lead exposure and its effect on not only the crime wave of the past, but also the future crime waves that we will inevitably experience thanks to the mass poisoning we are experiencing right now. In 20 years, you're going to see a huge spike in violent crime, and this is the reason why. And you're going to want to save this video, because in 20 years, you're going to want to archive this video and take it out of your hard drive and show all your friends that you were in the know and that you had the understanding before them and you did all you could to try and stop it, like I am. So you're going to want to know this video. You're going to want to save this video in your favorites list and watch later list, just in case you want to watch it any time. Now here's an interesting little tidbit for you that corresponds to the point I'm making in the video as a whole. Toddlers, this is actually is actually a very important point to illustrate the cause and effect that I have already told you, that I have already demonstrated with my chart. Toddlers who ingested high levels of lead in the 40s and 50s, alright, they ingested the lead in the 40s and 50s, which I just showed on the graph is when there was a huge increase in the amount of lead in gasoline. So toddlers who ingested high levels of lead in the 40s and 50s were more likely to become violent criminals in the 60s, 70s, and 80s. But why does it have that effect? Why is there such a huge correspondence between lead exposure early in childhood and later criminality later in life? As Rick Nevin pointed out, there's a 90% correspondence with the two. Well, I'll tell you why. Exposure to lead results in deficiencies in neuropsychological functioning. Exposure to lead results in deficiencies in neuropsychological functioning, and this lasts a lifetime. This is non-reversible. General intellectual is reduced. So it leads to deficiencies in neuropsychological functioning, which includes general intelligence. It causes reduced problem solving, and the most important effect that it has, important to the fact that it caused violent crime, is that exposure to lead results in poor self-control. So you have an entire generation of these toddlers who get poisoned, unknowingly poisoned by lead, and then they grow up and they have neurological disorders and they have poor self-control, which leads them to do more violent crime. So that's something to ponder. That's something to really consider and really think about, and you have to really take a good look at the type of things that are going on in our world that we don't have barely understanding of. You are constantly breathing in things, chemicals and poison that you can't even see, you can't even consciously identify. There's poison lingering in the air at almost all times, and what this poison does is compromises our self-control. It compromises our spiritual oneness with the world. It not only poisons our body, but poisons our soul. It is just extremely harmful to the human race. And we need to have a better understanding of the world around us, what gives us energy. We need more scientific research, not only into lead poisoning, but also in moon power and how we can harness the power of the moon to ascend to a higher level of consciousness. If we don't harness the power of moon and celestial bodies, then we're forever doomed to live in this constantly repeating universe where we just make the same mistakes over and over again, and we never ascend to that higher level of consciousness that we are all capable of. We will never be in tune with that spiritual plane where our souls interact with each other. We will be constantly searching for answers to life's greatest mysteries and constantly trying to unlock the secrets of our unconscious mind when the key is right up there in the sky, people. It's the moon, it's the sun, it's the stars. We need to meditate. We need to focus on harnessing that power. So, right after you're done sharing this video and right after you're done doing your own research, because I encourage you to do your own research on this topic, and don't just take my word for it. Google search, do a Google search, do a WebMD search, do a YouTube video search, and watch other videos on this topic, because I'm sure there's others out there equally important as mine. And just drop a link to my video in the comments section just in case anyone else is interested in my video and the fact that this is one of the most important things that human beings should be talking about right now. Alright, just to elaborate on the specific effects of lead poisoning on the developing mind, the mind of an infant, which is still developing. Lead poisoning in infancy impairs the development of the anterior cingulate cortex and the prefrontal cortex. And that regulates behavior and mood. So, as I said before, it causes poor self-control, and it also impairs the development of parts of the brain that are integral to the regulation of behavior and mood. And if you're constantly in a bad mood, or the chemistry of your brain is out of whack, then you're not going to have a good understanding of the world around you. You're going to grow up with a lot of issues, and you're going to be more prone to violent crime. So that's another reason why, that's one of the specific reasons how lead exposure during infancy can lead to violent crime later in life. There have been so many studies into this, and it's not only just about the effects of lead poisoning on an infant's developing mind, because anyone with a brain will be able to recognize the fact that lead poisoning will be impairing the development of certain parts of the brain, and it is not even arguable that lead poisoning causes all this violent crime, because you can clearly see it in the scientific evidence. And many studies have been done about this in the field by respected psychologists, sociologists, physiologicologists. All these people, they study this, they do case studies, they get all sorts of tests done, and every single one has confirmed the theory that lead exposure during infancy accounts for over 90% of violent crime. So, numerous scientific studies confirming the link have been carried out. One study found, after 15 variables, a 4-fold increase in homicides in counties with the highest lead pollution. So, counties with the highest lead pollution, where people are more likely to be poisoned in the infancy by lead, they have 4 times more homicides than counties with low lead. So that's just one more piece of evidence in the stack of evidence that I've been building up the past couple minutes. Herbert Needleman of the University of Pittsburgh, and the University of Pittsburgh being one of the most respected universities in the country, highly respected establishment, and Herbert Needleman, one of the most acclaimed professors at the University of Pittsburgh. Herbert Needleman compared lead levels of 194 arrested adolescents with 146 high school students. The arrested kids had lead levels that were 4 times higher than just the normal high school kids. So it just goes to show that people who are engaged in violent crime and violent criminal behavior probably have some lead poisoning and high lead levels in their blood due to poisoning through the years of in various circumstances. One more study that I'll just mention real quick, just in case you need any more evidence, of this pretty basic idea that I'm putting out, this scientifically proven, this highly respected theory that lead poisoning during infancy causes criminality later in life of over a 90% relation. In 2001, a sociologist named Paul Stretsky and criminologist Michael Lynch showed counties with high lead levels had 4 times the murder rate of counties with low lead levels. So that's just one more piece of evidence. And these are respected sociologists and criminologists who know what they're talking about. It's fine if you don't believe me. I'm just a guy in the basement, in the garage. But if you're going to be denying these scientists, if you're going to be arguing against these scientists and their scientific results, then you've got something wrong with the brain. Maybe you've gotten lead poisoning. Alright? The link is impossible to deny. There needs to be more research and more funding into this. Alright? There needs to be more awareness about the issue, because the issue is still very, very important in our society. What I want to leave this video with is, we've all heard about the Flint, Michigan water crisis, where lead was found in the water, and you could actually see the lead. You could see that it's brown and it's disgusting water in there. Well, that lead is poisoning an entire generation of people, and that lead has been in there for years. You think that it's just a new thing, that lead just happens to be in the water now? No. Lead has been in that water for years and decades now, and that's why Flint, Michigan is one of the most dangerous places in the country. That's why there's so much violent crime there. It's because they've been poisoned for decades and beyond generations by lead-contaminated water, and I'm sure lead in the air, in the dirt, in the streams, in the oceans there. It's out of control, and people have been going to jail, the people who are supposed to be in charge of cleaning the water, but you know what? They knew that the water had lead in it, and they did nothing, and this has been proven in the court of law. So you have to wonder how many different counties in this United States, how many other counties, how many other districts, how many other cities have contaminated water. And we just found out that schools in New Brunswick, New Jersey had 12 times the federal limit of lead in the water, and you wonder why there's been such a spike in crime there and all over New Jersey. It's because they don't care about cleaning the water. They just they have shit water. Their water is contaminated with lead, and they don't care. But we need to start caring. We need to get out there. We need to storm the streets. We need to hold up banners and shout mantras, and we need to get our water clean, because they're knowingly poisoning us. They want to destroy our will. They want to spiritually crush us. They want to just completely make us their slaves. The CIA introduced crack to urban cities in the 80s, and that only worsened the crime wave. And it just goes to show that the establishment, including the CIA, including the Pentagon, including everyone in the White House and beyond, they have a stake in poisoning minority communities, as well as the population as a whole, because they know that if people are out there committing petty violent crimes, then they're going to be easier to lock up. It's going to be easier to push political agendas, because you have that fear. It made it easier for throughout the violent crime bill in the 90s. And they knew that the crime wave would eventually end, because this has been known by them that the lead in petrol was phased out in the mid-70s. So 20 years later, they knew that the violent crime wave would eventually peter out, because that's when the lead poisoning petered out 20 years prior. So they already knew, and they passed that crime bill in 1994, anticipating that, and that just served to bolster their own political positions. And it helped Bill Clinton win the '96 election. And this is a video that you're going to want to share with everyone, because if they see that you're watching this video, they're going to know that you know what's going on. They're going to know that you are in tune with the world around you, and they're going to respect you more. So please subscribe to me, because I'll be uploading a whole lot more videos in the future. And please write a note to your congressman asking him to stop poisoning your water with lead. And I want you to pay attention to Google search lead, do a news Google search for lead, and keep up to date with all of the scandals across the country involving lead poisoning, because it'll blow your mind how common it is and how many counties across the nation are suffering from lead poisoning. And I guarantee in 20 years there's going to be another violent crime wave, and we have to prevent this, people. Let's get out there and let's stop this lead poisoning. We need to do it now. And by the way, you're supposed to be embracing moon power. There's a full moon coming. The full moon cycle is here, people. We need to harness that power. We need to seize the day. We need to seize the night. And when the night comes, we have to go out. We have to meditate under the full moon. We have to gain that power, gain that energy, electrify our dormant cells, amplify the charge in our synapses, and get our blood flowing, people. Let's go. Let's change the world here. We got to do this. And if we don't do this, then it's all on us. The blood is on our hands, people. We have to get out there and save the world. People like Chris Evans, people like Ryan Reynolds, people like Belinda Carlisle are out there every day trying to save the world. Well, so am I. They inspired me. They inspired me to save the world, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So everyone, get out there, go vote in the elections. Vote no lead. Vote anti-lead movement, and I want you to go out there, hold up signs and chant slogans. I want you to get out there on the streets and take your water back. Let's go out there. Let's occupy this, whatever. This is a far-reaching crisis here, people. We need to educate ourselves. We need to educate the masses about this so we know what affects us. We know what we're putting in our bodies, what is in our bodies, and how that affects us, how that affects our development. Let's do it, people. Come on. I know you can do it. You have the power to make this video go viral. I want to see it go viral, people. Come on. Let's do it. Share this video. Subscribe to my channel. Leave a comment. Come on, people. Leave comments here. Like my videos. And most importantly, share this video with all your family, your friends. Post it on Twitter to all major politicians. And I just want to wish all of you luck. I want to wish you good health. Thank you so much for watching. Seamus out.